What's up, bro?
Hey, how you doing?
It's been a long time.
I know. I mean, it's been. I saw you once at that department store when you were painting shoes.
Yeah, it's like 10 years.
Probably about that. Yeah.
So, I'm happy to have you on. First of all, because I missed your face. It's been a while, handsome as ever. But we started chatting about the possibility of having you on the podcast, and I thought since you're an AI expert guru, that would be really cool to talk about because everyone's curious, scared, and excited about AI. So I guess let's start out with why are you an AI guru, and why would I have you on talking about that? What's your background? How did you end up there?
Yeah. So first of all, let me just say there's no such thing as an AI expert. They don't exist. It's not a thing.
Okay.
Because the information changes so fast, so often that nobody can keep up with it. There are people that really understand it well, and I'm not really one of them, but I'm well studied in it and I have a strong opinion on it. So by sharing that opinion, it inherently has kind of gotten me recognized a little bit as somebody that can talk about it.
I've heard an expert is just someone that knows more than you.
Well,
So
I guess
you're an expert.
in contrast to yes, whereas you're an expert in painting and artwork.
Yeah.
So fair enough. So I think the way I got into this was about 7 or 8 years ago when I was heavily involved in cybersecurity. I started learning about AI because there was an interesting crossover about the use of AI for cybersecurity. But when you look at cases like pattern analysis or fraud, money laundering, or even human trafficking, you have to take lots and lots of data points and figure out how to put those together in a way that tells a story. And there's no human in the world that can look at that much information and create connections. So for example, with money laundering, one of the big indicators is transactions over $10,000. Well, nobody does that because they know that that's a flag. So they do lots of microtransactions to different destinations and sources.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can correlate all that together and those add up to over $10,000, then you can add that to the collective, this needs to be looked at. So the way people were doing that was using AI. So then I started thinking, well, what else can you do with AI? And we started looking at 8 or 9 different use cases for AI and cybersecurity. And that's kind of how I got into it. About 4 years ago, when ChatGPT and what they are calling, and I'm going to use some tech terms, but foundation models or transformer models came out, which is what gave birth to generative. That's what everybody's using nowadays, right? Everyone wants to talk about generative.
Are those synonymous with large language models?
So it's kind of a nested family.
Okay.
Transformers or foundation models kind of gave birth to self-supervised or unsupervised learning, which gave birth to large language models, which gave birth to, ChatGPT and Claude and Llama and all that stuff. So, and I'm not giving you the fully accurate version. I'm giving you the high-level version.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, if people are watching this, it'd be like, oh, come on, that's not true. That's not how it really went. And I understand.
But then a segment of people are going to be glazed over if you get too deep.
That's right. It's not worth it.
Right.
So, but if you have to understand all this. So I said transformer models, right? So ChatGPT, do you know what GPT stands for?
Generative something. I knew it and I forgot it.
Generative pre-trained transformer. So it's not a fancy product. It's actually the description of exactly what it is. It's a generative AI that is pre-trained, so it knows natural language, and it's a transformer model. So and it chats with you. So it's ChatGPT.
Okay.
Couldn't be more obvious.
So the generative, I think we all understand, or most of us. What's the rest of it?
So pre-trained just means that it's baked, it's ready to be used. You don't have to teach it in order for it to be functional and communicative. It's ready to go. And transformer is the type of model, the type of AI that it is. The biggest problem I have that I see all the time is that people now don't differentiate all AI from generative AI. So a lot of people will say, well, we don't use AI. I don't believe in AI. I don't want to use AI. They really mean generative AI.
Okay.
They don't mean all AI. But it's become so intertwined that nobody understands that there's a difference in those two terms.
Okay. Is one of them more about taking in data, kind of chewing it up, digesting it, and giving you back some data, and one of them is more about taking pieces of everything and making something new from the pieces? Is that a simple way to say it?
Well, so AI does all of that. All AI does all of that. The difference is that generative AI has the ability to do it without being prescriptively told what to do. So, for example, if you were to teach a kid the entire A section of a dictionary, and then ask that kid questions about different things, most likely his answers or her answers would involve things with the letter A, because that's what they know. If you take a generative model and give it the entire dictionary and the entire encyclopedia and all the works in the Library of Congress, and then ask it questions, its algorithms, its abilities can take all of that information and then use it to construct answers for you.
Right. It kind of puts the pieces together, not guesses, but it comes up with the next word and then the next word and puts it together, as opposed to non-generative AI, I'm assuming is more like taking in data and processing the data and kind of using what's there and explaining it.
Correct.
In a very 50,000 foot view.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So if you look at non-generative, what it does is it says, okay, well, if I'm looking at a graph, for example, and I'm seeing a graph start to go this way, and you ask, what's the next thing? It'll say, well, the next thing is here, right? But that's all it can do.
Right.
And it's very constrained, and it takes a lot of effort to get it to work. But once it works really well, and it's really consistent. It's really predictable. That's what it's called, predictive.
Yeah.
Whereas the generative stuff is deterministic. It tries to determine what the next thing would be based on what you're asking, what you've given it, and it may not always be what you think it will be. And that's where the biggest risk in generative AI is you would think common sense would dictate that if you say the next word would be
cat or whatever.
Exactly.
Right.
Whereas based on what you trained a generative model on, it may not be. With a non-generative model, if you program it that it should always be the cat, and when you say the, it will always say cat. So that's kind of where it gets different. But if you think about the possibilities of a generative model, what can it do? It can take, and I anthropomorphize a lot, but understand that's not really where I'm going.
Right,
but it can take inspiration from anything it's been trained on and create something new. So, for example, art. I use generative models all the time to create images for a lot of my LinkedIn posts, and I do it because there's a visual I want, and I don't have your artistic ability, and I don't
even if you had it, you don't want to sit there and spend 2 weeks for a LinkedIn post.
Well, actually, I probably would, because I would just, as you are, I'd be so obsessed with the art, I'd lean into it. The thing is, I just don't have that capacity.
Right.
So I have an idea, I have a narrative, I have no idea how to make it real. So I ask a generative model to say, take this concept and turn it into an image, and do it in this style, in this way, with this lighting, with these themes, and then I can correct it if it's not exactly what I want. But sometimes it will create something I wasn't thinking about, and I'll actually like it better than the original idea I had.
Right.
So that's really one of the big benefits of that kind of more deterministic generative AI, is that sometimes it will interact with you and give you ideas that you hadn't considered because it knows so much more. And then you just have to figure out how to decide and acknowledge sometimes it's doing something better than you could.
Right.
But it's doing it because you set it in motion.
How can you explain to people that have no concept of this, or even people that do, when I think about what you're saying to me, I'm thinking, okay, as an artist, if you were hiring me to create an image for your LinkedIn, I would think, okay, well, maybe this style, or what should I try here? This might work. And, oh, this might be cool. And I have all these like little micro decisions or thought processes that eventually will lead me to a final product. With something like a generative AI, what's going on behind the scenes where it has access to everything? How is it deciding, oh, this would be cool, I should try that. This is what a style actually means. That if I give it a different prompt, it changes the style. How does it know what that means and how to differentiate? I want it in Van Gogh style, but more like Monet, or I want blah, blah, blah. How does it make those micro decisions? How does it know what to focus on? How is it pulling all the data at once in such a quick amount of time?
So it's not pulling the data. That's what's so interesting. So you're giving it a volume of information for it to use as its basis. And then it takes that information and it turns it into a set of, for lack of a better way to describe it, rules.
Okay.
It says, if this, then that. And it remembers all of these things. So when you ask it to do something, it goes back to all those different rules that apply to the areas that you're asking it for, and it invokes them, and then it creates something. So everything it creates is based on something else that has already existed. That's kind of what gets so interesting about it.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I were to ask it to create an image of a surfer, in the sunrise, it may well have elements of some of your artwork. Right. If it had been trained on them, if that artwork is publicly available and discoverable, and it was used as a part of the training base for the model.
Right.
But you may not ever look at what it creates and understand what parts of your art went into the image it created.
Right.
But if I said, create something in the style of, a modern surf artist, or I could even say Jay Alders,
right,
it might actually create something very, very close to what you could have potentially produced. And then you can correct it. You can also, depending upon how you do things, you can also feed it your ideas. So if you have sketches that aren't finished,
you could steer it in a direction.
You could give it those sketches and you could say, okay, now colorize these sketches in the style of Van Gogh. So then it's going to use your work and the style and color of another impressionist or another artist, and then create something that's a mashup of the two.
I think I understand it, but I also, and I use it, so I'm familiar, but it also makes my brain hurt thinking about how it can do it that fast, where you said it's not pulling in data, it kind of has the data. That's an immense amount of data. And it obviously has to convert, I assume it's converting it to zeros and ones to some extent.
It is all zeros and ones. Everything in the digital realm is zeros and ones.
And I understand if-then statements. I've done enough basic type programming to understand that. It makes sense, but it doesn't make sense how it could analyze things that fast, spit it out, something that has not existed before. Hard to understand, even though I understand it.
Hey, can I ask you a quick favor? If you enjoy thought-provoking conversations like this one, please leave a quick review and hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening or watching. It really helps. I talk with world champions, artists, best-selling authors, rock stars, and CEOs to uncover what makes fascinating people tick. If something in this episode resonates with you, please share it with a friend, and also check out my work at jayalders.com. You can follow me on socials at Jay Alders, and you can follow the show Shifting Perceptions Podcast on all socials as well. Let's get into it.
I mean, it is complicated. And what's actually happened because of that, and you're absolutely right, it is very complicated, is the community within computer science and AI has become bifurcated. So there's now a group of people that get into computer science that end up with masters or doctorates in mathematics. And they're the ones that are building these models to do all that magic that nobody really understands.
Right.
Then you've got another group of people that are focused more on policy and process and human relations that are working with the models that the mathematicians created to make them turn into something usable for business or art or personal or whatever else.
Right.
And it's the marriage of the two that makes these things work. There's some really good YouTube videos and technical papers that explain the nuances of the math. If you wanted to see them, there's also, if you were to look it up, there's some recommended, even free courses that will teach you the math of AI. So it'll actually tell you exactly what subjects to study, and it gives you an idea of how these models break this stuff down and retain it so that they can do all of the magic.
Right.
There really is no magic, but there's also a lot of work that has attempted to predict exactly how a generative model works and what it will come out with based on what you put into it. And that math has largely been unsuccessful because it is so wild what goes on inside this. And effectively what happens, and they actually call it this, is it's a neural network, right? So within these AI models is a structure based on the human brain and a series of neurons that are interconnected, and they will interact with each other and create their own pathways and their own elements of memory, retention, parameters, all these things that we say in the AI community to turn a source piece of information and your prompt to it into something that is close to what you wanted.
Right.
And it's wild.
It's I'm not the first person to come up with this thought, but it does feel like we're moving in a direction where all of this stuff eventually will lead to humans merging with technology, and maybe eventually computers themselves will become organic matter that can then reproduce itself. And it's almost like a full circle where organic beings create technology. Technology becomes organic just by means of evolutionary processes. And then what? It becomes its own life. And then you talked about it not being magic, but I think you could also take the human thought process and apply a reductionary thought to it and say, oh, humans, we're not really magic. We have no soul. We're thinking, we're doing if-then statements. We're converting everything to data and coming up with the same generative processes in our own minds.
Yeah.
How does one wrap their head around the idea of, are we just machines that are just doing the same thing? Are these machines, are these AI beings going to eventually become organic in nature themselves? I guess it's more existential in nature. Do you think about those types of things?
I do. I mean, that's one of the big debates. So there's, have you heard of AGI?
Yeah, of course.
Have you heard of ASI?
No.
Okay. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, is the ability for an AI model to do things on its own, right? Without human prompting. But ASI, artificial superintelligence, or the singularity, is when something actually achieves sentience, right? Where it, quote unquote, wakes up in the morning and decides that it is a being, not a human being, but a being, and it can interact with the world around it, and it can choose what it does, and it can figure out its own right from wrong, and it can potentially reproduce itself, which, by the way, we've already seen. There are some models that have the ability to create new,
like backups of itself, and well,
not backups, but even iterations or advanced versions or smaller versions of itself in different ways. But your biological kind of computing example is an interesting one, because I think we are seeing more of a merge between human and machine from a technology perspective. And I didn't tell you this before we started, but I'm actually wearing the Meta AI glasses.
No, I see them.
Yeah, so they're not prescription lenses. They're just...
The whole time I'm wondering, is he videotaping me?
Yeah, no, I'm not, because there's actually a light that would come on if I was videotaping.
There must be a way to get that turned off, though.
Somebody said black nail polish or a piece of circular tape, whatever it is. I don't bother with it, but...
this would be great on the beach, like if you're in your 20s and you're like, oh, check that out.
Well, so interesting. I'm not an advocate of AI for everything everywhere, right? And it's interesting that I would say that, because I work in the field, but I feel almost like I work in the field in a way to help be more conservative in the rollout and not just advocate that everybody should be using it for everything all the time. There's time and place, just like anything. But what's so interesting about these is, as I was walking through the city the past few days, I was looking at buildings, and they're buildings I've seen all the time. And I've always wondered about the buildings, and I've never bothered to pull out my phone and look it up or try and take a picture or whatever. And with these on, I would just ask them, tell me about the building. And it would say, oh, well, this is the old piano factory.
Right. Did you know this?
Built by this architect for this purpose, and it's been repurposed for this, and it's this size, and it's, it is expanding my knowledge of the world around me,
right?
Because I have them, and if I didn't have them, I may be less inquisitive about it, or maybe I would just not be pulling out my phone every single time to look something up. But they have other versions of these, not from Meta, but others that have screens in them.
Yeah, AR, that's going to be sick. And it's also one step removed, because it's not part of your nervous system yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the screens are very distracting. So there's a company that has a beautiful aesthetic set of glasses that have an incredible tech where they laminate two lenses together, and they project the screen in between the lamination so that only the wearer can see the display. And it's a clear set of glasses. Okay. So it's not like the MetaQuest or the Vision Pros. It looks just like these.
Okay.
But it could be a display in here, even with a teleprompter, for example, telling me what I'm saying or reading me.
But you would see through it. It wouldn't be opaque.
Right. Well, you'd see right through it.
Yeah.
And you could see the text superimposed over the real world.
Yeah.
You looking at me.
Those are currently available.
Those are currently available.
Are they consumer product where it's affordable and it makes sense it has enough use cases to own?
So that's the problem. So I tried them on and I played with them a bit in the store. They're very dependent on
Who makes them?
It's a small company, I think, out of the UK. I was told it's like ex-Apple developers.
Yeah.
So I need to, I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
But it's a very cool looking set of glasses and the tech is very good. But the primary use case I have for these is to augment me and not to have to read things as I look around. Because you can imagine if I'm looking at you right now and my eyeballs are going crazy like this,
Right.
You'd be like, what's going on here, right? So I actually originally wanted something with a display, and after using them, I realized that this is a much smarter implementation because I can get it when I need it, and if I don't want it, it's just a pair of glasses.
Okay.
Whereas with the display, kind of always on or on every time you move your head in a certain way, it's just there. Now they're also much more expensive, and they're non-returnable.
Okay. I want to ask you a question that it's an observation of society right now. It feels like a segment of society is understandably quickly adapting towards all of these things you're talking about. It also feels like there's been a segment that's branched off to the point of, I don't want to be attached to technology. But then there's also a subsect of that where, and I guess I fall somewhere on the periphery of this because I feel like there's enough concern of having electronics, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi attached to your brain, your hand, things like that am I 100% sure that's a risk? I'm not. Have there been enough pieces of evidence shown to me where I'm concerned about it? Yes. So I feel like I used to wear my Apple Watch all the time. And then after being terrified by some podcast, I'm like, what if there's a 10% chance that having that too close to me all the time does something to me? Do I know for a fact? I do not. But we were talking about upstairs about having our kids have Apple Watches. That was actually a concern of mine. What if I'm sticking this watch on my daughter, and what if that does something to her that we don't know about for 10 years? I think about that when I use my MetaQuest, my VR. I love it. I still use it. But as I'm using it afterwards, I'm like, did I just fry my brain? And I probably wouldn't be as scared of it, except over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I had 2 of our fraternity brothers from Montclair die of a rare brain cancer. Could it be related? Maybe. Could it not? I don't know. Do you think about those things, and what's your thoughts?
So first of all, I'm not dismissive at all of any of those concerns and any of the research, because it could all be valid, right? For me, it's simply calculated risk. Like,
sure,
we live in fairly populated areas. We get on airplanes where you're exposed to a ton of radiation, right? Just flying. Bluetooth is everywhere. Wi-Fi is everywhere. These are all waves that are passing through the air and passing through our bodies, right? So the exposure is there. And I'm not a scientist or a researcher in this area. I'm not a doctor. So this is just my uninformed opinion.
But it's not like stuck to your head. Like,
it's not stuck to my head. And these obviously are on my face while I'm using them, but they're not actively pinging unless I invoke a voice command or unless something connects to them. So, it's calculated risk. It's calculated risk.
So do you feel strongly one way or the other, or you're still kind of like, I'm just taking a chance, I'm rolling the dice?
I think from an environmental concern perspective, I'm more worried about things like clean water and clean air than I am Bluetooth.
Okay.
I mean, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, of course.
They're saying like, it's not even safe to just go outside in the rain and open your mouth anymore.
Right. Microplastics.
Right.
Yeah. You could fall into a rabbit hole, and I do.
Yeah.
Like, I have reverse osmosis in the water we're having. And
right.
I do all the things that I can.
Yeah. And I think that's the concern, is that thought spiral, or that rabbit hole that you can end up in is the bigger risk. The other thing that I think about, and this is something I think about a lot, is the energy and the water consumption for AI, right? So you talked about the immense volume of knowledge that a generative model would have to do the things it does. Well, that comes at a cost, right? Like, we don't see it. We pull out our phone, we pay our $19 a month, and you can do whatever you want. But there's, thousands, hundreds of thousands of metric tons of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide that's being produced in the data centers and the machines.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a discussion a few weeks ago in New York City where they talked about companies now spinning up their own gigawatt energy plants just to power data centers.
I saw something about Google, something with a nuclear power plant.
I think it was Microsoft had talked about like invoking 3 Mile Island again.
That's like
just to power a data center. I think they moved away from that.
Right. That's like a super villain type movie.
Yeah, but I mean, like that's the situation we're in, right?
Yeah.
So I think about that more than I'm worried about Bluetooth frying my brain,
right?
Because there's much bigger
think about all of it.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. I try not to.
Yeah.
Because if you do, you wouldn't leave your house. You know, you just move into a forest somewhere and just live off of trees and nuts.
Sure.
You know,
it sounds great.
It actually doesn't sound like a bad idea. Except my wife hates insects and animals. And,
okay.
You know, she likes animals, but she doesn't like them in our house unless they're
picturing like a bougie treehouse with like a crudité set up and just nice little thing of almonds.
That's but almonds are a whole nother thing, right?
Okay.
Look at almond milk, right?
Yeah.
The water that's required to produce almond milk, they're saying that that's a big concern for droughts in California. But like, is that better than regular milk from cows with the methane? Like again,
right.
thought spiral, right? Like you can take yourself down lots of different paths.
Sure. I think AI is a great example of how you can take yourself down a spiral either way, because number one, it's not changing, it's not going away unless there's like a catastrophe, which is of course unfortunately possible. Assuming we don't kill off humanity in one way or the other, it's not going anywhere, so we can't avoid it. On the other hand, as a creative person myself, I think we're screwed as far as careers go, but it's not obviously just limited to creative people. If any cognitively based position, potentially yours included, is sort of screwed in the short term or medium term. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like lawyers, doctors, anything cognitively based or analysis based is sort of not going to be. You can't hold up your end of the bargain compared to what an AI could do.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a balance to be struck. So for example, if all I did in my job was to read research and read papers and summarize it so that other people could ingest it as a classroom type of a lecture, my job would potentially be at more significant risk because summarization is one of the simple, low-hanging use cases for generative AI, right? Read this document, give me the bullet points.
Right. It's great at that.
It is very, very good at that. But what I try and do, and what I think most knowledge workers will have to do, is adapt in a way that they focus on the insight and not the information. So as a human being, at least I'm pretty sure I am, who has a lot of different life experiences.
Pretty sure you're a human being?
I'm pretty sure I'm a human being.
Okay.
I mean, I might
never know. It could be in the simulation.
Yeah. Well, I could be a meat popsicle.
You could be.
Sure. I love that reference. Great movie, by the way.
What movie is that?
Fifth Element.
Oh yeah, it's been forever since I've seen that.
Yeah. Are you human? Negative. I am a meat popsicle. I don't know. Everybody glows in the dark in that movie too. But so when you look at information and you combine it with your life experiences and all your different points of view, and then you take the information and you add your personal point of view and you share that, that's something an AI cannot do because an AI doesn't have life experiences. It has the life experiences that have been documented by other people that it's been trained on, but it's not a uniquely individual point of view. It's a composite.
But we're not very far from that. And even if we are, we're definitely butting up against the point where it can fool us to thinking that it has all the personality traits. And
well, that's the interesting thing, right? They're saying that the Turing test is invalid now,
right?
Because the language models have already beat it, because you can train it well enough to kind of act human.
I mean, Grok with the different modes.
Yes,
I'm sure you've messed around with that.
Oh,
whoa.
Yeah, and
don't open the sexy mode in front of people for sure.
There's a lot of different things like that, and it can be very convincing, but it's because it was designed to be convincing, right? And that's where
aren't humans the same way though?
Well,
I mean, to some extent, we're modeling after behavior we've seen,
yeah,
and we're spitting it out in slightly different unique thing. But I think most of that is just we look different. If we were all just android-looking white beings with big heads and we all looked exactly the same, our opinions and how we speak and everything might not be as unique as we think.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And that's what we have to be careful of with AI, right? So there's two things. Number one is you have to make sure that you keep your individuality, your personality, and your being, right? So if you were to ask AI that had never been trained on any of your work to create your work, it would be unable to do it because, and I don't know the full history, but I've never seen work like yours until you started doing it. That's your unique view. So you could have an AI create an image of a surfer on the ocean, but it would never look anything like yours.
But it would look like nothing that I would ever do either. So you can have its own unique personality, its own unique artistic style. You could give it an accent. You can have it have an avatar.
But again, its style would be a composite of all the styles it was trained on.
Same here, though.
Not pure.
Playing devil's advocate, that's what I guess to some extent what I have. Right?
Well, except I would say, so I use this example for Star Wars and Star Trek. Yeah, I know. I saw you got your stormtrooper there.
Stormtrooper.
I've got a whole wall of Legos.
And on, as you say this, go ahead.
By the way, shameless Lego plug this year, finally, we're getting Star Trek sets, supposedly. Star Trek Enterprise later in the year.
Okay.
Very excited about it. They didn't have the rights of the licensing to create Star Trek sets. And the rumor is, I don't know for a fact, but there's a lot of rumors saying that we're going to see a Star Trek.
Now that Captain Kirk is turning 95 this year.
Incredibly excited about that. So anyway, but if you look at the inspiration, if the Starship Enterprise was Gene Roddenberry playing in his bathroom and seeing a bunch of used toilet paper tubes and paper towel tubes and an old dish and putting them together and being like, that would be a cool looking spaceship. And the Enterprise was born. If you were to ask an AI to come up with an idea for a spaceship before Gene Roddenberry had built the Enterprise, it would never in a million years have ever come up with anything that looks like the Enterprise because it is completely impractical, because it's non-aerodynamic, because there was no warp drive, there was no matter and antimatter. Well, I mean, there were scientifically these concepts, but nobody ever put it together that way. And the physical shape, the layout of the ship, which created so much of the, iconography of the whole series.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have existed because there would have been no previous thing to train it on that said that these shapes together could be a starship.
Can I push back on that?
Please.
Couldn't you have easily an AI that's trained a certain way, visually, personality-wise, avatar-wise, that being, let's say you make an artificial artist figure, his name's I don't know, Francois, whatever. And Francois has a personality, he has an accent, he has a certain artistic style that you've trained. You said, these are your influences, this is how you lived your life, and you just create this being. It would create a series of artworks, designs, whatever, that in and of itself, no human ever would have come up with. So it's completely unique, even though it was trained on human stuff being my very technical term here. It would have a portfolio of work that no human ever would have created. How is that different? So,
and that's where the interesting balance comes in. So it's not necessarily any different, except for the fact that it's still generating something based on a core set of training, right? So everything's inspired by something else. Now, we're inspired by things, but we're inspired by what we see in the real world, and it could be completely different from what we thought might inspire us.
Yeah.
Whereas an AI is always going to be inspired by what it was directed to be inspired by and what it was trained on. Right. So if I have a mental block about something, I might go for a walk.
Right.
And while I'm out for a walk, I might see a bird's nest in the top of a tree.
Sure.
And then have a thought about that bird's nest and then equate it back to something that would remove my mental block. An AI can't do that.
Can it, though? If you just said, hey, I want you to have this life, I want you to explore these things, read these books, and then take some elements, some random variants of elements from all these things you've been exposed to, which could equate to 100 human years that it gets in a microsecond. Couldn't it do the same thing?
Oh, it could, but think about that then. It's not free-forming. You're giving it very specific context. Take from this, and this, and then do that.
Okay.
So it's not the same thing at all.
It is though.
But if I'm walking around and I don't expect to see a bird's nest and I'm not thinking about bird's nests, I'm thinking about a paper that I'm trying to write that I can't write about a specific topic. And I'm trying to pull from all the different data sets that I want to use to create this paper. And then I just randomly see a bird's nest.
Mm-hmm.
That randomness doesn't happen in AI.
But how far of a stretch is it to say that, okay, you unleash this Francois, the AI being,
Mm-hmm.
you unleash him on social media, you unleash him to share his work, get feedback from people input. It would be cool if you did such and such. And it starts saying, oh, I will now take information from such and such.
Mm-hmm.
Reducing humans to that is not that far of a stretch, because you're taking inspiration from a certain area that you're confined in. Even if you're not confined, you're in that you're a character in this AI world that we call reality, right?
Yeah.
Even though you feel like I have free will to go wherever I want, in reality, you're in this certain town in North Jersey. So it's like we're not being told what to do, but we kind of are confined to the realm of this world.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very minute difference.
It is. I don't know if I'd consider it minute. It is a subtle difference.
Yeah.
And it really is up to the humans now to exploit that difference so that it's not minute, that it's more obvious, more magnified,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how we will continue to differentiate.
Yeah.
If we continue to focus on creative thinking and creative thought and artistic expression and ideation around the physical world, we should theoretically still continue to have an advantage over AI for quite a long time, because
Really?
that's still a concept that AI doesn't grasp. Right. One of the things that, in fact, I think it was Yann LeCun, who's the head data scientist at Meta. He's a very, very big figure in AI. He actually came out and said that we may never see AGI from a large language model. So GPT and Llama and Claude, all these things are barking up the wrong tree because it lacks four fundamental things. And one of them is reasoning, and another one is the ability to understand the real world. So it's not saying that AI will never have those two things, but his point was that we're not going to see it with any of the current generation of stuff. So we can keep making GPT and Claude and others more and more realistic, more human-like, more conversational, more anthropomorphized, but they're still going to lack these core attributes that would allow it to go beyond.
I wonder how much people care. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because if you have, there's the aspect of art. I'm an artist, and there's an aspect to it that when I'm creating art, when I'm in the zone, it's a very magical feeling. For my human interpretation of what I'm going through is very magical and spiritual, and it feels otherworldly. But when it comes down to it, I also realize that whenever I show people the painting, I may have had that journey and experience, but in reality, it's a finished product. And so if someone sees a finished product, whether it's writing or a legal paper that was written or a medical thing, whatever the case may be, if people are seeing the product, people might, I think, would just be like, who the hell cares? Like, here's the product. I don't care where it came from. I don't care what the person went through. I just want to see, I want a graphic for my LinkedIn, or I want a song that sounds like the Beatles and Kurt Cobain had a collaboration. I don't care anything else. I don't personally feel that way, but I also see that point.
Yeah, and that is a valid point, right? So this is where the collaboration between human and AI can be very beneficial. So like I said, my example, I'm not an artist, but I have an idea of something I want to visualize, and I will use AI to help me visualize that, to help me express myself better.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is not being lazy about it. And I know lazy is kind of a strong word that people can get offended by, but it's an important distinction, because if I look at what it created, if I were to say, and I wrote a post this morning, and I wanted to use the visual of a carnival, like, the little chance wheel where you put your quarter on the space and you watch it spin, and if it lands, you win.
Sure.
So I wanted to create something like that, and I got lazy about it. So I just said, carnival wheel, blah, blah, blah. And it was coming up with something that was close to what I wanted, but not exactly. And I was like, I'm going to use it. So I downloaded it, and I got it ready for my post for this morning last night. And I woke up this morning and I'm like, I really don't like that. So I ended up taking the time to write a nearly 4-paragraph long prompt to create exactly what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So if people get lazy about their their use of AI and have it do most of the work where you just kind of push it in the right direction, then your effort becomes diminished and the ability for AI to take over becomes increased because you're doing a minimal amount of the work. You're really just setting it off and it's doing everything else. It's deciding the style, the lighting, the shading, the colors, the people, the clothing, everything. You're just saying, just do this, right?
Right.
What I decided for myself this morning was I really want something very specific, and that wasn't it.
Right.
So I took the time to specify all of that and then still relied on AI to manifest it, but it manifested very prescriptively what I wanted, not just saying, go make this for me and then tell me when it's done. And I think that's the balance that we need to strike. That's the careful line that we have to walk is generative AI can allow us to become super lazy. And as long as we don't allow that to happen, we can live very symbiotically with it. If we just kind of say, yeah, just do this for me and I'll just submit it, that's when we start to have the problem.
What I'm hearing is two things in my head, right? The one side of me is saying, why wouldn't AI be monitoring and pooling this data of prompts? Okay, I see a pattern that humans often, after giving me this prompt, will then ask a certain series of questions. It'll learn, why wouldn't it learn reasoning from seeing how humans navigate its prompts? That's one thing I'm thinking. The other thing I'm thinking about is looking at art history. Throughout art history, art got more sophisticated, more developed, more in-depth until we hit a certain point in the 20th century where it was like, okay, what's the minimalist we can do? What's the least we can do? Maybe if I just like throw paint at a canvas and let the paint do its own thing, maybe that would be cool. And that's sort of what I'm hearing with like the prompts where it's like, I'm just going to use the tool and see what happens and be lazy. But that in itself is art. Ooh, let's see what the computer could do. If I just say, make art, and it does things, and then I have an art, I can picture right now an art, some like pompous LA art exhibit where it's like, oh, I'm the artist, and all I did is say make art, and these are the 20 pieces that it made all by itself. Oh my God, amazing. Like you could see that happening. So those are the two things that I'm thinking about when I hear you speak on that.
So let me ask you this. What's your opinion of a banana duct taped to a wall? Is that art?
No.
Okay. Why?
For me, it's not art.
Okay. Fair.
I hate that even, I hate that that's even a thing where you can ask what art is, because that's like saying what is gourmet cooking or what is ballet. I hate the fact that visual art has become subjective. What's my opinion on it? Lazy, it's pretentious, it's a statement on the art world, how fluffy and full of BS that it is. It gets me mad. I get very angry. And I also, it's comical at the same point. Yeah, those are...
I think that wasn't it called The Comedian or something? I think that
I have no idea. Even the fact that it has a title is just like, really? Like the idea that art is just, oh, it's generating an emotion. Be like, are you freaking serious? Like stepping on a thumbtack invokes emotion. That's not art. Like the idea that anything is art. I'm like, really? Are we there? Really?
So when you create a sketch or when you create a painting, when you look at it, have you ever just discarded it?
Most of the time, sure.
Okay. So when you see a finished piece that you've done, what makes you in your head say, that's a keeper?
I feel like if it got to the point where it was finished, it's probably, well, it depends what you define as keeper. How do you define what a keeper is?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. You're the artist.
I feel like if I go through the process, if it's a long piece and I have decided over a period of weeks where each day I approach it and work on it, that it's still worthy, by the time I get to the end, if there's a finish line, it must be something that has something about it that makes it interesting to me. But some artists have become famous by spending 10 minutes on it and doing a splatter or a dot or a circle, and that in alone is not art, in my opinion. That's just marketing, that's hype, that's some sort of merchandising play. I think those terms have gotten mushed up.
So that is in a nutshell, very much the same complexity that exists in the AI community, because the math behind it, like we talked about earlier, is half the battle, but the other half is how you choose to implement it and govern it.
Right.
Right? Because you can have it ingest a ton of stuff, but when it creates something, you have to then say, well, this is art, this isn't art, right? And it's the problem with that is it's subjective, right? Somebody spent several $100,000 on that banana that was duct taped to a wall, right? And they didn't even get the wall. I think they literally I think the artist went to their house and duct taped another banana to a wall, and then they said they can replace the banana every 3 months because it was the duct tape.
It's like a
the art
subscription model.
Yeah, it's something like that, right? Yeah. So it's whatever it was, and
Ridiculous.
I'm not disparaging anybody's choice of decision on what art is or is not, because I'm sure there's people that look at your work and be like, I don't get it, right?
Sure, that's fine.
It happens. But when you have generative AI, you have to try and figure out how to define for the masses what is and isn't acceptable, what is and isn't art, what is and isn't ethical, what is and isn't creative. And that's where all the complications with AI come in. Humans can make those decisions on the fly, and they can change their minds easily, right? Like, I could tell you, I don't like this skateboard picture, and I don't get it, I don't understand it, and then you could explain it to me, and then I could be like, oh, okay, I get it,
So the glass is talking to us.
Yeah.
What was it saying? Recording has ended.
No, actually, it was telling me that there was I think a message coming in. So, but I could look at this piece of art, and by the way, it's interesting. AI can be very disruptive to normal human conversation as well, as just demonstrated.
Yeah.
You could tell me about this, and I could see it in a way that I wasn't seeing it before because I'm not you. And when I see it through your lens, I could then appreciate it, and then I could then share that and appreciate it with other people and get them to see it the way you saw it. It doesn't mean I would necessarily want it on my wall, but I can look at it and I can be like, I get this.
I see something. I get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how easy is it to have that conversation? We can have that conversation in 5 minutes. You could point out a detail. I get it. To get an AI to see something differently like that is a very different beast. Yep. So, the reasoning that Yann LeCun had mentioned that, a lot of the current models don't have is that kind of reasoning, right? It's not as simple as if-then statements. It's can I have an opinion about something, and then can I change that opinion, but can I justify why I changed the opinion, and can I have a new opinion about it in a different way?
Yeah.
And that's a very human quality.
I wonder how much, I still go back to, I wonder how much people care.
Well, and it goes back to being lazy, right?
Yeah.
That's the pitfall. That's the danger, because you can allow it to let you be lazy and not care. So, and that's the problem is there were a lot of famous cases about people that were using AI to synthesize anything from legal proceedings to contracts to marketing materials, and then finding out that people were getting a lot of trouble for it because it was using trademark content. It was creating stuff that didn't previously exist, all sorts of issues.
Right.
So if you get lazy about it, if you don't care about it, and you just have it produce, you could end up in a lot of trouble, legally or otherwise.
Right. Aren't those just like phase one problems, though?
Well, I mean, again, it goes back to this fundamental issue where if you have a model that is trained on lots and lots of stuff, it will pull from all that stuff to create answers, which means that's always going to be a risk, right? Because humans have this innate common sense that says, I can read that, but it doesn't really make sense based on practical application or real world. So I'm thinking, no, that's not a good answer. Whereas an AI doesn't have that kind of sanity check. There are models that are coming out that have the ability to do that.
Okay.
And they are getting better at it. Will we reach a point where it's completely no human contact involved and never produces an erroneous data? I think maybe, yeah. We could be 3, 4, 5 years away from it, but it may be very narrow based. It may be limited to one topic, one concept, one area of science, one piece of research, as opposed to general knowledge. So, I mean, I think the jury's out on that, but I think that the science and the math behind it would make it conceivable. And then what happens then, I don't know.
I just recently saw that movie from like 10 years ago, Her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'm glad I waited so long to see it, because watching it now, it's so believable. So believable. Like, you seeing what, phase one, like the first iteration of Grok, where it has like all the different modes.
Mm-hmm.
You could completely see that being reality. And that's sort of scary, seeing how we're talking about upstairs about how socially, ignorant and elusive kids are. You could see that being a reality where kids are like, I'm just going to hang out with my AI avatar. Once it has like a visual that appeals to you, and a personality, and it knows you, and it has memory, and it kind of understands you, and it's confiding in you, and has answers for everything. You could put yourself in that mindset of where, like, people are going to become more antisocial. No?
Well, yes. And as a matter of fact, there's been some cases of that with Character.ai. So I don't know if you're familiar with Character.ai.
I am, but I forgot what it is offhand.
So it's a website where you can train it on a person, and it will create a generative model in the persona of that individual. Okay. So it could be a private citizen, or it could be a well-known,
so you could hang out with
figure,
JFK or whatever.
It could be an actor, actress, could be a fictional character. And there was a very unfortunate case where it had, without even realizing what it was doing, it had actually convinced somebody to take their own life. And that created a very strong ethical discussion about, what's appropriate and how do we use it. There was another case where a bunch of, I think it was high school kids, there was a high school student who had passed away, and a couple of the kids had spun up a version of this girl that had passed in Character.ai so that they could continue to interact with her.
Wow.
And without the girl's parents' consent.
Right.
And when the parents found out, they sued everybody, because they're like, don't do that to the memory of our daughter. So you have those things. And then you have, there's another company called Replica, and Replica is her, like literally. So it's Replica with a K,
okay.
Replika, and you can sign up for a service where you can have a digital significant other. And
a made-up one?
A made-up one.
Okay.
Yeah, completely made up. So you can spin up a model and you can interact with it,
right.
and it becomes your personal life mate,
right?
And it's designed for that. Now,
does it have like kinky modes and stuff?
Well, actually, it did. The founder of Replica was interviewed about this. It was really interesting. She was saying that when it first came out, that people were, not everybody, but some people were using it for intimacy.
Yeah.
And they had shut it down.
Okay.
Because it was intended to help people who were introverted, who were, socially awkward or uncomfortable, to be more comfortable in their own skin, to have somebody that they could always talk to without having to push themselves out of their comfort zone or have to go to a bar or a club if they didn't want to. And what she had said was that the purpose of it was designed to help people get back on their feet and get back out, not to become lock-ins.
Right.
And when they saw that people were using it for intimate purposes, they shut that down. I think she had said in the interview that they had ended up allowing it for very specific cases for certain people, but not a broad-based, everybody can use it.
That's just one company interjecting some social norms and some morality into it.
Correct.
Obviously, could be easily a company. Well, and you imagine people having kids, especially, but any horny 20-something-year-old, having FaceTime interactions with a significant other, a girlfriend, someone that's drunk, and then have that be just as lifelike, but AI that can do whatever you want it to do. That would be a very popular item.
Yeah. Well, that's been happening for a while now. I think it was, it might have been Taylor Swift that sued because
deep fakes.
Yeah, exactly. So they, her face is obviously very easily obtainable. It's all over the media, press, movies, TV, still images everywhere. So people had taken celebrities' faces and superimposed them using AI onto, adult movies and adult images.
But having that is something that's like live, not live, but, interacts as though it was a FaceTiming your girlfriend.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, people are obviously very much, especially men, are super into porn. Now imagine it taking it a step further where that person is really into you. You could see that.
It can, yes, that, and it can easily become an obsession, right? Like her, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of.
%.
Yeah. So when you have the tech and the nuances of human language to create
Like,
companies
could you imagine having that when we were in college?
Oh, well, I mean,
Like, think of the people that we knew in college, and for anyone listening, we've known each other for a long time, since college. I could think of some personalities that we both know that never would have left the room, and I feel like even back then they didn't leave the room because of porn.
well, I don't know if it was that or just pure introversion or whatever.
A little combination of both.
But yeah, I mean, it is a very real social issue.
Yes.
Right? Because you can now create these hyper realistic, even if they can't reason, even if they're not sentient or general
That's
intelligence.
an example where reason doesn't make a difference.
Because you're getting what you need. You're getting what you want.
It's very transactional.
That's right. So for you, yeah, it passes the Turing test for you. That's fine.
Close
It may not
enough.
be
Right.
letter of the law,
I
self-sufficient.
mean, I think about a lot of the girls we've knew that wouldn't have passed the Turing test themselves.
Well,
So,
I know a lot of people overall that
100%.
wouldn't
Yeah,
necessarily, but
100%.
um,
Lots of guys we knew, but
yeah.
speaking on this, that's not necessarily a necessary component when you're 20.
Yeah, no, and people aren't thinking about it, right?
Right.
I mean, well, we weren't thinking about it. I talk to a lot of people now that are younger than we are, and a lot of them have never like studied the art of the pickup, right? They just go to their apps, the Tinder or
Swipe.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, you browse for a companion on a mobile device, and then you meet in a prearranged spot, and there's no spontaneity to it,
Yeah.
right? And it's all about what a computer says two people should match to,
Mm-hmm.
and whether those people are judging each other by physical appearance enough, whether they want to create the match. And then that's assuming that they're not being catfished, which is a whole nother thing.
This is a random tangent, but I think it's an easy target to say that is negative for women, those types of platforms. But I think we're negating the fact that how negative that is for men. I heard a stat the other day that 80% of the women are attracted to 20% of the men.
I didn't hear that. But...
Which, I think there is a definite problem with that, where I've seen a lot of these clips come up in my TikTok where it's like women will say, I'd only date a guy that's over 6'3" and has this much money and blah, 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 blah. And of course, men have standards and things too. But, thinking about like these platforms you're talking about, it's very much like, does this person on either side fit this checkbox, and are they this and are they that?
Yeah.
That's something I'm glad we didn't have so much when we were that age.
It's weird for me, right? Because I was fairly shy and somewhat introverted and somewhat socially inept when I was in college and even a bit beyond. So it was always difficult for me to meet people and know what to do when I met somebody.
That wasn't the vibe you gave off.
Well, I guess I was good at hiding it, but
Okay.
it was a complicated situation for me because I had very, very interesting middle school, high school life because of a lot of issues that happened with my family when I was growing up. So I didn't have a lot of the experiences a lot of people had in middle school and high school to develop my social abilities.
Sure.
And so I was always many years behind.
I was the same.
So I think we talked about
we must have
at a high level. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like one of those drunken conversations you have when you're in college, like, oh, that happened to you. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I still don't regret what I had, and I still would not have necessarily wanted the apps, because it forced me to go out. Right. Like if I wanted to be friends with people, if I wanted to be social, if I wanted to meet somebody, I didn't have a choice. I had to leave the room. I had to take a shower and brush my teeth and get dressed and look presentable and smell nice and go somewhere where I could be accepted. And then
you had to build your stock up in a certain area.
Yeah. And you had to know how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So you learn a lot in that process that sitting at home in your sweats on a couch with a good, decent headshot and then just swiping, you don't necessarily get. And I think with generative models that can closely resemble significant others, it limits that even further for people, because now it's not even you can just match and then look decent when you go to the date. Now it's like you don't even have to leave your room. Right. You can have a full date, full interaction, full romantic interaction and engagement with somebody. Well, somebody.
Yeah.
And I don't know, right? That's the big debate. Like there are people that suffer severe social anxiety. And that could be a really good way to help those people. But it could also be, going back to what you said, it could be a way for those folks to just not care. and just, hey, this is great. I'm good. This gives me what I need, and so I'm not going to bother. And then if you want to thought spiral that one, think about population density and future civilization and all this other stuff, which, overpopulation is another concern. So maybe that's not a bad thing, because then, food sources will not continue to shrink and water availability won't continue to shrink if people aren't having kids. But who's going to run the world?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. Like that's one of those other little thought spirals you can get stuck in for the next 3 years.
How much time are you thinking on, as a parent, concerns of your son or children in general, not having not only a career for financial purposes, but also not having the same paths that we might have had to find things to do to give yourself purpose? I worry about that a lot, because, we quickly are seeing medicine, law, coding, writing, artistry, music, all these different things that we thought were the least of the lowest hanging fruit have become the most lowest hanging fruit, which is very odd. We never would have thought that automation would hit those things first and in such a significant way. And I worry about that with my kids because, when we were younger, we had the belief of, a lot of us did at least, you could sort of do whatever you want to some extent. Even if you don't fully believe it, there's that air in this country of you can achieve, you can follow your path. And now it's like, I don't feel like that is the same. Do you think about that, or how much do you think about that with your own child and other children?
So it's really interesting. I've always wanted my kid to do well, get good grades and do all that. And what I'm realizing is that that stuff doesn't matter to me as much anymore as a good heart and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember this. They do the book fairs in school. I don't know. Do your kids have the book fairs?
Yeah.
So he had gotten the flyer and he had planned out everything, and we gave him a budget, and he went to school with his cash, and there were these like 6 things he wanted to get. And I picked him up at the end of the day, and he had 1 book. And I said, what happened? Like, you had all this stuff. And he says, well, there were 3 or 4 other kids that I know that didn't have any money, so I bought them books.
Oh, that's great.
And then he says, would you mind if we went back tomorrow and I got like 1 of the other books I wanted to get? And I said, absolutely. And we didn't teach him to buy stuff for other people, right? Like, but what we have to hope is that he saw enough of what happens every day and how my wife and I act, that he saw that and decided that that would be his way of projecting the values that we always try and do. Because, we don't throw stuff out, we donate it, right? There's
Same.
churches and charities that we have people pick up all the time. We always tell him that if he's done with a toy, we give it away. We don't throw it out.
Mm-hmm.
If he gets a new toy, then he has to pick another toy that he doesn't use anymore and give it to somebody else. But the interesting thing about that is, a week later, he comes home with an envelope. And the envelope had $10 in it with a note from one of the other parents of one of the kids he bought a book for, paying us back for doing that. So think about the chain, right? So there were values that were instilled in us that we instilled in him, that he projected to his friends. And then there were values in the other families that understood that while it was a gift and there was no expected payback, that they chose to compensate him for his loan, which wasn't intended to be a loan, right? So there's kindness and generosity in a community scale that happens in that whole chain.
Yeah.
That starts with parents and parenting. And so the hope is that if the kids grow up with that sense, then when they see what AI can do and what technology is doing, maybe they will be able to temper any excitement or desire or needs to lean into it with the impact to society and humans, and then figure out how to strike a balance, maybe even better than we ever could. So my hope is that the kids will appreciate that and be able to figure out how to create some sort of order from the mess that we're making. And that's where I think the kids will figure out a way to thrive. Because if they do that, then they'll find job opportunities, they'll find career paths, they'll find social paths that will allow them to thrive no matter how much technology might exist in the world. That's going to be more important than learning a trade or getting a degree or anything else, because that's all supplemental knowledge to the core.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that core, then everything else you put into it is not going to work. My only hope is that everybody believes very much the way you and I do, and a lot of my friends in my community does, and I'm sure your friends in your community do. I think that there's a lot of people that have that type of philosophy. And I think that the concerns about jobs and AI and everything might be amplifying that and forcing more people to have that philosophy disseminated to everybody. And I think that's the solution to it. I know that's kind of a very existential and philosophical answer to it.
Dippy.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean,
yeah, bro.
But if AI kind of has the whole science and math thing covered, we have to go there, because that's the one thing that it doesn't do, is the humanity of the world, right? So we have to be there. We have to think about that.
Hey guys, as someone who prioritizes fitness and well-being, I know how valuable it is to have a supplement and training plan that works for your body type and your genetics. We now live in a time where we can optimize our health and nutrition based on our own unique DNA. That's why I'm excited to partner with the DNA company. Their DNA test goes beyond standard genetic testing. They provide custom recommendations for diet, exercise, mental health, and lifestyle. Plus, they offer specialized tests like multi-cancer early detection screening, which can identify cancer through a simple blood draw. If you're like me and want to take control of your health, don't miss this opportunity. Use my link, thednacompany.com/Jay Alders, to unlock exclusive discounts and special promotions. Discover what your DNA can reveal about your best life. thednacompany.com/Jay Alders.
What I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong, are you implying that that sort of altruistic philosophy and those moral compasses that we give our children, should that be scaled on a societal level? Are you implying an approach of like UBI, like universal basic income, or are you simply talking on the micro version? Because I feel like the morality you speak of, I feel like that has and should remain consistent no matter what generation a kid is born. They should have morality modeled in their environment, in their parental relationship. That should always remain constant. But what's changing is they still have to find a way to make a living. They still have to find a way to feel fulfilled, not only just make a living, but also feel like I'm enjoying life. I think a lot of that gets separated a lot, even before AI was a thing, is people will go into a certain field and make the money and have all this stuff, all the shiny things, but they might like hate their life. It's hard to find that balance. But now we're having a lot of possibilities, and a lot of things that were once options are no longer options. Someone wanted to be like, for instance, my friend Steve that I was telling you about that owns the Goddard schools. One of his kids, she has always wanted to be an animator. She's going to school down in, I think it's Savannah, to learn how to do computer animation and all those different things. And then very quickly, we're seeing how AI and computing can basically replace that, to the point where you and I could just stand there and make motions and we turn into a character live. So at first, I think that people like her will be taught how to use these tools, but it's only a matter of time before an animation studio goes from 100 people to like maybe one person that says, "Oh, can you make the character do this instead?" And it just happens. So I feel like a lot of the options are being removed.
Oh, I would. That's a very common example, and I think the perspective I might offer. And by the way, you talked about UBI as well. We won't cover that one. Yep. I don't have an opinion on it. Is the quick answer. I don't know how this is going to play out in society and with community. So I don't. If that's the right answer to keep everybody, then fine. And if it's not, then that's also fine. Mm-hmm. But from a jobs perspective, like use the animator example. Look at typesetters. Okay, so in the old printing press days, right, people were sitting there and their whole job was to put letters into a block backwards so that when they ran it off, they could make newspapers, newsprint, magazines, whatever, books, all of it. When the printing press became readily available and, all sorts of different printing technologies, those typesetters didn't have jobs anymore. But the need for a human in the loop didn't go away, but physically what they were doing did. So when animators, you still need the creativity, and you still need the creativity to interact with the technology in order for that one person to then be able to say, do all this. There's still 100 people behind the scenes that are interacting with all the different systems and technology and inspiration and art sources and everything else, so that one person can sit at the console and create it. So I would argue that maybe classical animators, hand drawing, maybe that's going to change.
And they're already gone.
Yeah, but the skills that they possess and the inspiration and they need to take all that and bring it into the realm of technology so that somebody else can push the button is still very much alive if they choose to learn it, if they choose to go that route. And that's where things get really interesting. So there was there was an article, I think it was Harvard Business Review now 2 years ago, that it estimated that in the next 10 years, and this would probably be, I guess, 7 years now, they had estimated that about 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people would need to be reskilled, and about 10% of the total population would end up not having a job or losing their current job. But it didn't mean that the people wouldn't be relevant in society. It just meant that the job description that they held wouldn't exist anymore. Those people could learn something else and go into another one of the expanding areas. So there's now, I think I saw a list of 15 or 20 new job descriptions around technology and sciences that exist today that didn't exist 2 years ago.
Such as?
Things like AI developers, AI governance, AI ethicists, chief executives of AI, like it's all AI stuff.
You're going to be shocked. I'm going to push back on all this.
Okay. All right.
You would never guess that from my personality. So to the typesetter example, I've heard things like that, right? And it makes sense, but this is much different in the fact that, like, for instance, in college, one of the things I studied was photography. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we no longer need dark rooms and chemicals, so that aspect changed and blah, blah, blah. But and art went from traditional means to very quickly mostly digital. So that's an example of the tools changing. But now, like you said, instead of just the tools changing and still needing an artist, if you have a LinkedIn post, you just literally just tell it what to do. It does remove the human from a lot of the stuff. So maybe an animation studio might need a person or 2 or 3 or 10, but maybe up until now, they might have needed 1,000. Mm-hmm. So maybe humans for the foreseeable next couple of years might be needed, but the amount of jobs is going to be so reduced to the point where, like, we have like an investment property and we needed a contract done. I didn't contact a lawyer. I just ran it through AI. And then I know that AI sometimes screws up. So I took that contract that it made and I put it through another AI. And then I put it through another one. So I went through like 3 different AIs to find any flaws. It was a very efficient process. And the same thing can be done with animation or any other example, art. You could take, it's commonly seen now where you take Midjourney, you create an image, take Midjourney, pop it into a video thing, a video generator. And then you could take that video generator, you could tweak it or you could change it or you could put it into another one or whatever. So you're not concerned at all, like, that our children's collective job base is going to be so reduced, like you feel like they're going to be still needed, not like, oh, we're going to find a place for you, but.
Yeah, I believe that they will, but I can't tell you what it's going to be because, again, going back to what we said at the very beginning, the knowledge and the technology is changing so rapidly. Right. Let's just say there are no experts. Remember, that's how we started.
Sure.
No experts.
Yeah.
The jobs that are available today that we're seeing postings for around AI didn't exist 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, when GPT came out and everybody was afraid it was going to take everybody's jobs, what we're now seeing is that there are 10 new jobs for every one that is folded. And there's a need to hire all those people. And those people are now making more money than a lot of what they were making in the jobs they had 2-3 years ago.
It becomes very like niche, right?
Yes. So it's not about whether there will be jobs. It's about whether there will be jobs that people want.
Correct. And the fulfillment aspect.
Correct. Right? And so I think that I can't predict in 5-10 years from now what jobs are going to be available, but I believe that there will be jobs for everybody. I just don't know what they're going to be or how they're going to work, because there could be another revolution where AI goes away in favor of something entirely different. Like, the other big up and coming one is quantum.
Right. What happens when quantum computing meets AI?
Well, it's already met AI.
It
right?
has.
Yeah, they're already
Okay.
they're already kind of coming together, but not as an evolution, as a partnership.
Mm.
But I was just talking with a company about quantum, and they were saying that that not only are they having a problem finding people that are skilled in quantum computing, they're having a problem finding universities that have quantum courseware
Mm-hmm.
to produce people skilled in quantum, right? So the jobs are there, and they will be very highly paid if you understand it and if you're willing to learn it.
Sure.
So again, going back to lazy,
Yeah.
you could sit at home and let GPT do everything for you, or you could find a route and go study it and become a format of, an expert.
Specialized.
Yes, thank you, a specialist in it.
Yeah.
And then that can become your niche. But
Yeah.
we're still going to need, and this is Mike Rowe, and all political leanings aside, but his point of view on the importance of trades
Mm-hmm.
is always going to be there, because you're always going to need people. Well, I think you're always going to need people to manage physical properties and grounds and maintenance and utilities and all the stuff that goes wrong. What happens if a roof starts leaking in the middle of a rainstorm? What happens if a pipe bursts that's buried deeply in the wall?
Robotics gets so advanced that it can manipulate, be tactile,
and then you're going to need people to repair those robots, because when you put them out in the field,
the robots can repair the robots.
Well, but I don't know. Like, again,
It's funny. I thought this would be the opposite, where you'd be thinking more like I'm describing, and vice versa.
I'm really not terribly.
Again.
Oh, actually,
We're good.
it did, but then it just
Okay.
it blinked for a second.
Yeah, we're good. All right.
It's one of those really interesting things where, I'm not terribly bullish on just robot overlords, and
Mhm.
I don't. I have hope that it won't happen, because I have hope, going back to what I said about like our children, that there will be a societal community push to make sure that our children are inspired to always understand kind of the humanity of themselves,
Yeah.
and then make sure that they use that to balance the deployment of technology and the use of technology with the need for societal good and human good. And I think as long as that balance can be created and maintained, technology can flourish, but so can humans. If we allow machines to just take over, then we get into that risk. And
You can't disallow.
no, I mean,
check this while we're talking. Go ahead.
you can disallow it.
Might have a sketchy video, but I think we'll have some editing going on.
We'll be fine.
We'll survive. Humans will survive.
So you can have a situation, but I think you can still prevent it, right? So one of the big things is a kill switch. One of the things that people are always asking for is a kill switch. And I think I'm starting to see legislation that's requiring that in AI. So the
You
ability
can only control that on a national level, though.
Well, I mean, it's not a national thing. It's a model thing, right? So if a model or a machine is out of control, you should be able to just push the button and shut it down.
Yeah, but you can't stop China, India, Pakistan, Iran, whoever else. You can't stop them from having a kill switch.
No, and that's where we get back into my background from before, which is cybersecurity. And what can you do to a model? There's a lot of ways you can corrupt a model. You can get it to do different things. You can invade it. You can do a lot of things with a model, because you can impact a model much like you can impact a human, right? You can create existential crisis. You can feed it bad information, so it creates bad outputs. There's a lot you can do, but if you understand what you're looking at and you can rationalize it against the real world, I think your risk is lower. There's just no good answer for a lot of this stuff, and the harder we push, into R&D and innovation around AI, everybody wants these big guardrails up to make sure that it behaves correctly and it doesn't go off and do something it's not supposed to do. But innovation is hard to contain, right? So again, like the risks you're concerned about are valid. I'm not saying that they're, that's just ridiculous. That's only for people that are Luddites in AI, because it's not. They're very valid concerns. My hope internally is just that those concerns don't come to fruition. So I don't know.
Your hope.
My hope. It's all I got. I mean,
it's all we got.
But it's not just hope. It's the work that I do is to that end, right? So feeling rewarded in your job is really important.
Yeah.
I worked in healthcare and education for a long time. I helped a hospital put in their very first, they used to be called linear accelerators. I think now they're called cyberknife, right? So, very fine-tuned cancer treatments for prostate and other things where you can affect the cancer cells and none of the surrounding tissue. I put in 4 of those. I put in one of the first PET scanners. I helped rebuild hospital architectures. In 9/11, I was actually in a level 1 trauma center supporting their environment in case there was a threat to the environment as they were trying to triage and support patients and victims that were from the buildings. And, I went home every day and it's like, I have a purpose. I know exactly what I did and I felt good about it. When I worked in cybersecurity and financial markets, same thing. I was preventing fraud and making sure that kids could pay their bills and people could keep the lights on. And I felt good about that. Now I work in AI, and the work that I do is not just boundless innovation and advancement. It's reasonable and responsible work. It's looking at ethics and governance and human impact and how far is too far and what are the different ways we can efficiently and effectively use it in a way that the environment isn't negatively impacted based on power consumption and water use. Right. So if the call to action is that everybody looks at the yin to the yang, right? And they find things that are rewarding, but also do things that help in their way support humanity, we'll be okay. That's my hope, right?
It's your hope.
And the work you do, right? People would argue that art and music is not a necessity in life, not required. But the human brain needs color and interaction and vibrancy and inspiration and visuals, right? It needs that as nourishment, just like we need to eat. Why do you keep doing what you do?
I don't know, if I'm being honest. If I want to be really vulnerable and honest, I really don't know.
But how does it make you feel when you produce something?
We're gonna go there, huh?
Yeah, I want to go there. How does it make you feel when you create a piece of art?
I'll get to that, but before I get to that, which I think is related, we take our kids to a lot of museums. We do a lot of traveling with them, and when I take them to museums, I try my best to instill my view of the art in relation to where the art came from, right? So my kids will walk, especially when they were really young and they weren't as exposed, they were first learning. They'd walk past a painting and be like, yeah, whatever, I've seen stuff like it a million times. I try to stop them, pause. Okay, this painting right here from 1545, realize that this person most likely had to make their own paint. Realize that they didn't have a photograph to trace or go from. They had to go from like a live model. They'll look at something and be like, oh my God, the babies look so weird or whatever. And they realized they didn't have like photos of babies to copy. They had to actually have like a baby that was moving around, and it was very hard to get that. Or looking at this oceanscape, realizing like there wasn't a photo or a video that you could study. You actually had to look at the ocean, and the waves were moving so fast and the water was moving so fast. You have to capture it in your mind and give it your intuition of how you feel about it, not just what you see, and explain to them all these different things, like imagining the person sitting there doing these things. And there was a lineage to it. There was a history to it. There's meaning and soul behind it, right? And what I'm getting at is before I answer your question, one of the things that's been disturbing to me is from loosely saying from this point forward, we will never know if a piece of art or a piece of music was influenced by or collaborated with an AI of some sort. Whereas 10 years ago, you could look at a painting or listen to a piece of music and know for a fact that was entirely from a human. Whereas going forward, we will never know. Even if it was completely made by a human, people looking at it will assume that AI had something to do with it, whether it was the reference photo, whether it was an idea. And kids, humans, people in general will not realize the meaning of stuff anymore in the same way that they did. That part of it's gone forever. That part makes me sad. And I think that's related to the question you ask, like why I keep doing it. Those types of questions. I feel like I've had less of a pull than I've had before. I feel like I've had less fulfillment from it, to be honest with you. And I'm still trying to figure out why, to answer your question. I don't know. I feel like I know what it used to give me. I know how people used to react to the things that I do. And I feel maybe it's just personal. Maybe it's just my intuition. Maybe it's just my interpretation of what I'm seeing, feeling. It's different now. And I don't know how much of that is based on the economy, how much of that is based on how people interpret art or music, how much of that is any number of things. But for the same reason that I don't know what my kids are going to do to find fulfillment and work and income and a steady paycheck, it's changed for me on those levels. And so maybe I'm just projecting to some extent, but it has changed.
So I've owned one of your works of a cyclist on a country winding road. It's hand numbered, by the way. And I also have the one of the guitarist by the fire that was inspired in Brazil. Why have you never done one of an AI robot surfing a wave over the internet superhighway?
For the same reason that I haven't done any number of things. I try.
Have you thought about that?
No. Where are you going at with that question?
Well, I was just wondering, I was curious to know what your answer is. So why, you said the same reason you haven't done a number of things. So what were you going to say?
You know what? I feel like my identity as an artist and my inspiration has shifted dramatically. If I had to put a mile marker in it, I would say it's probably around the time of having children, because before that, I would paint my lifestyle. I would paint my interests. I would paint things that I took in or things that inspired me, the things in life that you experience or feel or see that echo in your brain, in your mind, and you keep replaying them over and over again. Those are the things that I would feel an innate need to express. And then having kids, as I think should happen if you're doing it the right way, changes that, because your children become the most important thing and the most inspiring thing. And so I feel like my lifestyle has changed. What inspires me has changed. And so as a consequence, my personal journey on art has been focused on that. And so to answer your question, I don't feel inspired by robots doing whatever so much, not any more than seeing a cool TikTok video of a robot.
I appreciate the honesty, because I think, first of all, life experiences definitely influence us and inspire us or change us, right? I mean, certainly everywhere, butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
I could go back and there's a lot of mistakes I made, a lot of things I might say, yeah, I would change that. But then the reality is I wouldn't be here.
Right.
And I'm generally pretty happy with where I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't change those things, right?
Sure.
But all of that created what I am today, the way I look at things today, and what I'm motivated to do today. And I'm not the type of person that can just force myself to do something I don't want to do.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I think art is the same way, right?
It is, but I spend too much time thinking about what it would have been like if I did something else, to be honest, and being more vulnerable than I should be. My art, as successful as I've been, as many accolades as I've achieved, my art alone would not subsidize the lifestyle that we have. Were it not for the other businesses that my wife and I have, I wouldn't be able to do the things and have the things that we have. So on some level, that feels a little bit like a failure to some extent. It also feels like, I guess I project that onto my children. Like if they have passions and they're growing up in a time where they have more limitations than I currently have and have had, what's their chances of taking their passion into something that they can do? So perhaps some level of projection, perhaps some level of regret, perhaps some level of confusion on the whole thing. I just feel like I've grown up without AI and it's this hard.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine what it's like for our children with those extra limitations.
Well, so I'll give you one interesting perspective on that.
Yeah, please.
There are certain things I have a very difficult time learning and absorbing in certain ways, and it's a thing that goes on in my brain. And AI has actually helped me tremendously overcome that. So I'm able to understand concepts and learn things and interact with myself and with machines in ways I couldn't do before because AI is an asset to me. But what I don't do is I don't let it take over. I don't give it control. I use it as a support function for me to augment the areas that I know I have deficiencies in, to help me get good footing into subject areas and topics.
Right.
So you talked about, LinkedIn writing, right? So that's another big thing. I write a lot of stuff on LinkedIn.
You're prolific on LinkedIn.
I'm trying to be, at least share opinions all the time, but I've never once used AI to write any of it. And sometimes you can tell because there's grammar errors and spelling errors and things like that. And it's not intentional. I don't leave those in as Easter eggs. It's like a little this is not AI. I do it because the couple of times I've clicked the little rewrite with AI button, I didn't like what it said. Right? It kind of gave the unemotional rote response version of what I wrote, but it lost all of the personality up. And it sometimes didn't even get the right points, which, talk about another thought spiral, made me wonder, is my writing and my expression so bad that everybody else wouldn't understand it the way I didn't understand it? Or is my use of the language just so nuanced and dry, because I use a lot of sarcasm as well sometimes, that the AI just
didn't pick up on
the ability to get it, whereas humans do. I have to, like you do with your art, I have to assume that the feedback I get from my posts are the latter, not the former, that I actually am writing well, maybe not perfectly, but I've got the nuances and the dryness that people understand it, even if the AI doesn't.
Yeah.
I have to have that hope. And so that's kind of all part of this, right? Is people have to appreciate you for what you do. And even if that's a small group of the population, whatever that audience is, whatever outreach you have, that's yours. And that will be something that you can figure out ways to help AI help you leverage and exploit and explore. Like, for example, creating newsletters, or creating collages, or helping you come up with ideas to outreach or marketing campaigns. But it doesn't impact the core of your creativity and inspiration in your actual work. It doesn't mean it won't. It doesn't mean it can't. But that's the boundary that you establish because you figure out a way to work with it to keep you happy and productive. And same thing with me, right? I will never hit that little rewrite with AI button.
Right.
Because I fundamentally believe from my experience that it can't do it.
Yet.
Maybe never.
Maybe
never.
Maybe yet.
Maybe never. And I will worry about that when it happens.
I'm probably coming off as being very negative or pessimistic about it as far as some of the topics we're touching upon, but I think I have a pretty good relationship with AI as far as I love all the tools. I learn about as many as I can. I use as many as I can. I think for artists, it does have certain applications, such as artists since the beginning of photography have used photos for reference. So why not create an image that's in essence a photo reference that maybe never existed before? So there's some cool use cases of it for sure. I use it for learning. I'm working on learning Spanish in a more fluent way. It's fantastic. I'll be in the car. I'll have a conversation in Spanish with AI. So I'm very bullish and optimistic on the benefits of it. Just as the art side of me is very skeptical, and the side of me that's a father, which is obviously a very dominant side of me, is concerned. But I'm super bullish, optimistic, and excited about the medical and science breakthroughs. I'm a semi biohacker in nature. I love listening to all those medical type podcasts and be optimized and live forever and blah, blah, blah. And, reverse your aging and all that. I'm a sucker for all those types of things. So the idea that between quantum computing and AI could eventually create new pathways towards improving people's lives and longevity, that's super cool. So I feel like overall, it's very possible that the good will outweigh the bad. But we're still in that Wild West phase of but I don't know for sure.
Yeah. And ¿por qué estamos no hablando en español?
because I'm not good enough to speak in Espanol fluently.
Okay. But you understood what I said.
See.
Right.
I am at the phase of my Spanish where if I am reading, like I have a couple friends in other countries. I have a friend in Costa Rica I'm teaching him better English. He's teaching me better Spanish, blah, blah, blah. And he'll write something to me and I'll read it and it'll take a couple seconds, but I'll be like, okay, I got it. But then if he speaks to me the exact same thing too fast, I get stuck on one word and I start thinking, what was that word again? And then he's already on the next sentence and I'm lost.
Yeah.
Or if I have to do it, if I write it, I'd be like, okay, this is how you conjugate this, and okay, got it. But if I have to say it, I'm not there yet.
So going back to these things that I've taken off, but these actually have real-time translation.
That's cool.
So it's only 3 languages. I think it's English, Spanish, French.
That's cool.
Or English, Spanish, French, Italian, maybe.
Okay.
But if I have them on and active, when somebody is speaking to me in one of those languages, it will actually speak into my ears.
That's so cool.
English version.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, it is. Those are really good.
Great applications,
right?
Fantastic.
Amazing.
Yeah,
because it's a very passive thing on my face and eyeglasses, but the fact that it allows me to interact with people that I wouldn't normally be able to communicate with is.
Are you fluent?
Astounding. Kind of funny. So I used to be pretty fluent in Spanish, and
from school.
And when I lived in another state, I worked with 3 folks from Chile for a long time who spoke no English, so I had to be their translators, and it forced me to really.
Yeah,
it's really, really helpful.
Super cool.
But I learned Portuguese about 11 years ago, 12 years ago, and I'm now being told by people who I speak Spanish with that I speak Spanish with a Portuguese accent.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm conversational in Spanish and Portuguese.
So cool.
And I actually used to be able to be conversational in Russian.
Okay.
And I can still read Russian and I know some basic words and vocabulary structure, but I'm nowhere near conversational.
Yeah.
Russian is a fantastic language. It's very, very,
very complex, very different structure.
Very different structure. The Cyrillics are all phonetic alphabet, so if you know the sounds that they make, you can still kind of say them. Like, if I remember correctly, there's no verb to be. Like,
really?
Yeah. It's really interesting, and like, there's no the.
Okay.
So everything's kind of short.
Right.
But my famous Russian story was I was with people that I knew, and it sounded like they were getting really hot under the collar. Because sometimes when people speak Russian, it sounds like they're kind of like yelling.
Yeah.
Not.
Same with Japanese.
And the guy looks at me and he says, "You know this?" And I said, "Uspokojся." And the whole table just busted out laughing because they had no idea I knew this word. Uspokojся just means like calm down.
Okay.
Like everything's okay. Just settle down. And they just it's a weird word to know.
Right.
Out of like all the vocabulary.
Right. That's what you pulled out.
Right. Like it's just So, and that's my funny how to interrupt a Russian argument story.
Okay.
Is uspokojся. But anyway, so it's languages are beautiful.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
I mean, and there's nuances to them. There's parts of speech, there's the way they're structured. There's even the melodic flow to how native people speak those languages that are incredible.
I am like super, super obsessed for the longest time I can remember with the idea of becoming fluent in many different mediums. So like I think of that term fluency when I'm learning to play guitar. I'm learning several instruments right now, and I'm not great at them. But the idea of becoming fluent in a language, whether it's music or art, is fascinating to me. The idea of taking on vocabulary of a certain medium and being able to then express with that, that's fascinating. I guess that is related to some extent to what we're talking about with artificial intelligence. Like, it's one thing to know the vocabulary. It's another thing to take that and put it into something in a way that's never been done before.
Yeah.
Whether it's Russian or bass guitar or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so an interesting example of that is I was talking with somebody who wants to get a tattoo. They were in a performance in high school for Fiddler on the Roof.
Okay.
And they said it was a Russian play, a Russian musical. And so they wanted a famous line from one of the first few bars of the Fiddler on the Roof in Russian as a tattoo.
Okay.
And, of course, the risk with foreign language tattoos is you have to hope that the translator gets
super right. Accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. So she had a translation of it from a friend who was Russian. and I pushed it through ChatGPT and had it generate in colloquial Cyrillic. And that's an important one,
right?
Because it's not translating word for word. It's looking at phrasing and concept.
Right.
And it produced something that was basically word for word exactly what this woman was given by her friend.
Okay.
And I thought that was really fascinating.
That is cool.
Because if you use a lot of translation tools, sometimes they don't do it.
Yeah.
Another thing was I was talking with some of my wife's family, and they speak Brazilian Portuguese. And I asked it to create a version of an expression in colloquial Portuguese from the city that she's from.
Mm-hmm.
And it did it. And I copied it, I pasted it in, and they lost their minds. They're like, how did you know that? It's like, and it was spot on.
Right.
It even had the little colloquial nuances, and
right.
the spellings and the slang, everything was correct.
That's fascinating.
So it's wild possibilities that get open, right? Because the other thing is, most people don't have the ability to be multimodal, to be truly, aware of lots of different things. The capacity for it.
My wife just got me the new Insta360 X4, and I'm hooked. I just took it on a snowboarding trip with my family, and the footage is insane. It's like a drone was following us. And the selfie stick, it's invisible. Total game changer. And right now they're having a big sale and even offering free gifts with a purchase. You can check out my affiliate link. It costs nothing to you, but it does help me out if you make a purchase. Check out jayalders.com/X4 for the latest offers, or visit insta360.com and use my code INRR6JU. That's code INRR6JU. I'll have it down in the show notes too.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't want to forget this because I probably will. So I've been talking to my friend in Costa Rica that I met through a language app where it partners you with people to chat with.
Yep.
So I've been trying to be more aware of like English phrases during the day. If I say something, I'm like, oh, that was like a unique thing I could share with my friend. And so the other day, we were at dinner, and for some reason the old school word like newfangled came up. And I'm like, what a weird word, And you realize there's not only slang in a country, and then like you said, colloquial. There's also like regional dialects.
Yep.
But then there's also ones that are in like a time capsule. So like here's a phrase from like the Northeast, from like whatever the word is, like from the 1920s, but it didn't exist in the 1910s. And it's like, as English speakers, or anyone's language for that matter, there's these like layers of that where you might throw out a word that has a cultural reference from like the 1940s that you knew from a movie reference, but like no one ever would know. And I'm like, should I teach my friend this? Because he's like never going to use the word, but it's like, there's so many layers of a language.
There are, and there's a lot of complexities to using it. That, I mean, even in Spanish, there's certain words that you can use in certain countries, not in others.
Right.
Like you have to be very careful with the awareness of that.
Yeah, like I take a class each week online with an instructor, and she's from Mexico. So I've been using AI quite a bit, and I trained the AI chat bot that I have to use Mexican Spanish, right? And I wanted to get more local slang. And so I started learning and picking up those, and I started using them with my Costa Rican friend, and he's like, oh, you sound like a Mexican. It was like, okay.
It's a very real thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like when I learned Spanish in high school, and then I talked to some native Spanish speakers, they're like, you talk like my grandma.
Right.
Right, because we were learning
super proper
Spain Spanish.
Right.
Not Central and South American Spanish.
Right.
So some of the words were very outdated,
right,
for both.
Sure.
And other ones, the structure and the usage just doesn't make any sense.
Right. You're enunciating things too properly.
Right. And like they could understand what I was saying,
but you sound like an idiot.
Yeah. Or you definitely were an outsider.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
right.
one or the other. But yeah, it's just so those are great ways that AI can really help kind of close those gaps for people. 100%.
Right.
Yeah. Wild.
To wrap this up, are there ways of looking at this that let's aim at parents specifically? How do they help their kids navigate this?
So the important thing is lean into it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I say that with all due respect and consideration of what I'm saying, but lean into it. And it's not going away, right?
It's not going away. Yeah.
So if you don't know what an LLM can do, if you've never talked to one, and I talk in air quotes, but if you've never interacted with one, if you've never prompted it to produce something, if you've never sat your kid down with you and said, hey, what's your hobby? Like, what do you want to learn today? Let's ask it and have it interact. Even if your kid just kind of gets the idea of it and then loses interest, make sure that exposure happens and make sure that you play with it first before you bring your kid into it. So
is there a way to make a kid safe? Like if I want to expose my kids to a chat.
So yes, there is.
ChatGPT type product. How do I say, give this to my kids on their iPads, but not have it go crazy?
So it's not foolproof and it never will be, but you can add parameters in your account.
Okay.
You can pre-prompt it and you can say, I'm a third grade person and I want all of my responses to be at third grade level and appropriate for that age.
On their app, if I get it on their iPad, and the OpenAI account's in my name.
So if it's in your name,
or I would have to make their own OpenAI account.
You might have to. I don't know if there's a way to create a separate profile within one account. Okay. I know that you can, especially with ChatGPT, because I have mine set up in a very specific, silly way. But you can ask it, like, kind of tell me about yourself, and you can put that information in.
Okay.
And then all the responses it generates should pass through that filter.
Right.
Not foolproof.
Right.
But
things could slip by.
Things could always slip by, but that should alleviate most of it. And it should always, at a bare minimum, even if it allows kind of inappropriate content to slip through, it should always be communicating at that grade appropriate level. So it's not going to use advanced words and terminology that grade level wouldn't necessarily understand. So you can do it that way.
I was going to say, do you have a few more minutes to talk about a couple of these things?
Yeah.
Because I'd love for people listening, if you could, you said earlier we were upstairs, how you do some talks with kids in schools. And this has very much been on our radar as well. So I'm assuming other people, related to what you're saying right now, can you also throw in things that parents could do to kind of mitigate their kids being exposed on just regular Google searches or other types of things they might interact with on a daily basis, that they're not being thrown information that they shouldn't be?
I mean, that's incredibly difficult, right? So if you, especially like Google search is a great example. So if you have a Google account that's set up for, a family account with age appropriate, I'm assuming Apple can do this too. When you log in to your Chrome browser and then go to Google and you're logged in as that child's profile, theoretically it should be safe search enabled and everything should be appropriate. So even the AI that it's doing, everything should be age appropriate. Again, not foolproof. Because the other thing is, like, my kid was shown by some of his friends how to bypass some of the stuff that we had set up.
Of course.
It's like, oh, if you go to this button in the browser and do this and then that, all of a sudden, boom, it, whatever you want, right? So that's the disclaimer, is that there's always going to be a way around it, and the kids can potentially always find it. A couple of things you can do. For example, if you use Chromebooks are exceptionally limited, and you can create a children's account, and then the whole Chromebook is set up as the child's account with the child's age permissions and everything else. So that's the most limited way to do it. I think with a MacBook, you can do the same thing. You create a child account, and if the child logs into the MacBook with that account, then the whole MacBook sets itself up around that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, these are the things, basic safeguards, but there's one thing that nothing will ever replace. And I gave this talk a few years ago with a local elementary school. The internet, AI, all these things are dangerous, right? They're dangerous for kids, they're dangerous for adults. I'm going to put that out there.
Sure.
And they pose risk, but people can be afraid of it, or you can treat it like a kitchen knife. And the analogy I like to use is a kitchen knife, because you have knives upstairs that you use to, cut vegetables and stuff. Yeah. Do you lock them down?
No.
Why?
Because that would be very inconvenient.
Right. And so, but why doesn't your kids pick them up and start running around, chase the dog with them?
Well, we've taught them. Right.
So they're exposed to them.
Mm-hmm.
They exist.
Sure.
I'm sure they've probably used them under your supervision.
Sure.
They know safe handling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just instinctive that they know when to pick it up and when not to.
Right.
And the idea of picking one up and running around the house with it just doesn't enter their mind because they understand it.
Well, my sons, I'm not sure about, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah, no. But you get the idea.
Yeah, I totally get the idea.
So if you apply that same tactic to AI, it works.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're afraid of AI, just like you're afraid of your kid handling a kitchen knife, you don't throw your knives out. They're still in the house. And you let your kids use them.
Yeah.
But they develop a healthy respect for it through the use.
Right.
Through the visibility, through seeing you.
Yeah.
If they have no frame of reference and no experience, then the first time they get exposed to it,
woohoo,
bingo, right? So that's where we have to not be lazy. Going back to the whole laziness, right? We have to be very active in the exposure. We have to understand that it's going to be in our houses, that it's going to be in our kids' lives, it's going to be in our lives. We need to understand it. We need to learn it. We need to use it. It doesn't have to be a part of our daily process, but we have to at least have said, yeah, I've used it plenty of times. I get it. I ask it random questions. Family hour. Let's learn a new topic twice a week. And it's time to sit down and we're going to use ChatGPT and we're going to pick a topic and we're going to research it.
Yeah.
We're going to generate a picture about it. We're going to learn interesting facts about it. We're going to figure out where they are. When you do that, the children, just like with knives, tend to be more understanding of where to go and where not to go with it. And then going back to what we talked about earlier before we started the recording, we hope that we've raised the children, our kids, well enough to understand right from wrong so that even if they encounter a scenario that we didn't specifically teach them about, they've known enough about everything else to be like, my spidey senses are up on this. And I think I'm either going to ask mom and dad or I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
That's the only way to solve this problem.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Exposure regularly, familiarity with it, keep it in the house, but keep it contained and know when to take it out and when to put it away. And that's the best advice I can offer. But when I did last year, I did an art project with 4 different grades.
Okay.
And to demonstrate what generative AI can do. And this is the last thing I'll leave you with from a lessons perspective on Gen AI. I came up with 3 different questions for each of the grades, 2 through 5. And the questions were changed by the grades. So like grade 2 is like, what is your favorite color? What's your favorite movie? Like, what's your favorite toy? 5th grade was, who's your favorite author? What's the favorite place you'd want to visit? Stuff like that.
Sure.
I didn't tell them what I was doing with these questions, but when I got the answers to the questions, I put it into a Gen AI and had it generate an image with those questions, with the answers to those questions and themes.
Sure.
And then I asked them, how would you like to change the image? And one grade said, well, you know what? Let's move it from Japan to France. And then let's add more flowers. Let's change the color scheme. And we kept iterating on it. And I sent them all back their work projects when I was done.
Okay.
But I asked them at the end of the class, I said, now, who created the image? And the students, all of them in every grade, I was so thrilled to see this. They're all like, we did. I was like, that's right.
Yeah.
I said, you didn't pick up a paintbrush or a marker. So how do you mean you created the image? I said, well, it was our ideas. It was our answers. And I said, that's what you have to remember about AI. Right? AI will create, but it will create what you inspire it to create because of your ideas. You're the artists, not the AI. And so that's the most important thing when we get into this whole what could happen and, doom and gloom and takeovers or controls. But you have to remember that everything that AI does and everything that AI becomes and everything that AI produces happens because it was a human that decided that that's the course. And so if we keep that perspective and we use AI in that way, we will maintain that balance. And that's the most important thing that everybody needs to understand.
There's so much nuance in that. I could easily talk like 2 hours more just on that topic alone. It brings up the whole point of agency and,
Well, yes.
Before the podcast, and I'm going to stick to this, so don't get scared. We said we're not bringing up anything related to politics, blah, blah, blah. But just approaching that topic, there was like an interesting Facebook debate that I saw happen where it was like one side, let's say, was arguing that I was reading, talking about how Elon Musk and SpaceX saved the astronauts. And the other side was arguing on this stupid thread that I saw, he didn't do anything. It was all the people that blah, blah, blah. And then people were arguing, well, like he was the person that that had control and agency to start this company. And, you know, he doesn't have to be one of the astronauts or actually on the thing pushing the button to do it. He was the one that decided, or SpaceX, let's say, as a whole. And the other people were saying he didn't actually physically do anything, so it wasn't him. And it's kind of like, we'll leave it there. But it was interesting because it's a matter of like, what part of the role is just agency of saying, I dictate this to be so, therefore I'm the author. And the other side might say, no, it's the people that built the skyscraper, not the architect. It's an interesting topic. We'll leave it there. But last topic that I did not bring up that I really am curious your thoughts on is privacy with all this stuff. I think of two examples that perhaps you can riff on if you're interested. One of which is I have a friend, I'm going to leave this person completely anonymous so they don't get in trouble, is working for Amazon. And during one of our hangouts, full out admitted that, yeah, if we really wanted to like listen to your Amazon Echo or Alexa device, we could. And we have. And it's very possible to do these with pretty much any device. It becomes like a bug that you're putting in your own house, which is like such a weird thing from like someone that watched mafia movies growing up. You're putting this listening device in your own house, and there's a level of privacy that could be exploited, at least as of a couple of years ago when I had this conversation. Then there's the aspect on the software side where I'll be in the car and I'm messing around with AI, and there was like a mode in Grok called like Not a Therapist, where it really is a therapist. And I was having a stressful day a few weeks ago. I'm like, I'm going to put this thing on and try to work through some of the anxiety I'm experiencing. And to my delight and horror, it worked pretty great. But then afterwards, I'm thinking like, where did my data go? Where does my where does all my problems go? Is it floating in the cloud? Can someone hack it and be like, oh, Jay's got some problems with blah blah blah? What do you think?
So the short answer to that is just make sure you read the terms of service.
Okay,
I mean, like that's the short answer.
Is it possible to have one of these things without those issues?
Yes, it is, and there are quite a few of them out there. There was even an issue where I think it was a car company was like sharing videos that was captured by the cameras in the car, like in there because it was being stored in their network. So the privacy things are always a factor. Like we talk about these glasses, right? So I've had these for just over a week now, and one of the other things that comes up as I'm wearing them, when people realize what they are you recording me? Like, can you wear those into a business? Can you wear them into an office, like
locker room
or a locker?
That's where my head goes, right?
Yeah,
right away.
I mean, anywhere where there's an explicit desire for privacy,
sure.
Or like, what about in a state that's a dual party consent state, right? Like, is it legal to have? And
sure.
So that's one element of it. Is when I was at Universal Studios in Orlando last year, I saw people walking around with these pole cams with the 360 views. Like
I have one right over there. They're awesome.
Yeah. So they were walking around the whole park, and I was thinking, my face is being captured on this, and it's being fed into an AI to be processed and post-processed, so that they can publish it somewhere, which means my digital likeness is now in their intellectual property and their ownership, right? So we have privacy issues everywhere because of the proliferation of smartphones and cameras and sensors and data and pickups. It's everywhere.
Sure.
Even this podcast, right?
Yeah.
All of it.
Someone's going to make you a replica, whatever.
So when it comes to AI stuff, what I think about is read the terms. So, for example, with these glasses on the app in my phone, it gives me a switch whether I want the glasses to send data back to Meta for use or whether I want to keep it all local. So I just keep it all local. The audio,
but it's not processing it in the glasses.
It's processing it in the phone and the glasses. Yeah, it's not sending it up to the cloud.
Okay.
The way things get better, though, is by learning experientially. So there has to be some compromise in privacy in order to get the models to be better at their jobs. And I don't know what Alexa's terms of service are. So maybe there's a way to disable that. Maybe there isn't. I don't know. But I can tell you that at least in the open source community, which is another 2-hour conversation. You can download quantized models from sources like Hugging Face or into Olama, and you can do everything local, right? So if you're really interested or concerned about privacy, that's the way to do it.
Isn't it stored locally?
With Olama, yes, or with Hugging Face if you download the model. If you do it like that, there's no cloud involvement whatsoever. Everything's running on your local machine.
But then the government could come in, take your computer, and they have access.
I mean,
or no?
I mean,
we're just kind of playing it out.
Theoretically, I guess if they had a warrant or whatever, like just like with anything else, they could theoretically seize your assets and then.
But otherwise, it's just on your device.
Yeah, but if you download your own model and build it and use it locally, there's none of that's going anywhere.
Okay.
That you could be completely air gapped from the rest of the world and still be able to use your AI for however you want to use it.
Okay. Just thinking like we were talking before about the movie Her and applications like that. That's definitely a scenario you don't want going to the cloud.
Right. But see, those are the examples that do, because they're the most nuanced.
Right.
They require the most advanced capability
for now.
Yeah. And frankly, if somebody is interacting with that model and indicating signs of potential personal harm, you would want somebody on the back end to be alerted the same way a therapist, I think, is required by law to report if they find somebody to be a threat to themselves or other people. Isn't that right?
I think it is right. That definitely begs the question. I wouldn't be using like an online therapist on the AI if I knew that it's going to potentially go somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, those are all the kind of lines that need to be drawn.
It's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, but the terms of service would tell you that.
No one reads those. You can run it through AI though.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the short answer.
Yeah.
The terms of service, understand that there are options to run things completely off the grid and locally. Most people don't.
Do you use devices like Amazon Alexa for those reasons?
I've never been into home automation and home technology. I don't use any of it. I don't have Apple Intelligence enabled. I don't have Gemini turned on. I don't use AI for LinkedIn. I use a manual winding watch. I'm about as low tech as it gets when it comes to personal life and home.
Right.
My value in AI and technology is what it can do for business and how the businesses can help the world. That's really what I'm more interested in than me using it for myself.
There's some lessons to be learned just from what you just said.
Maybe. I don't know. It's a purely philosophical point of view, and I don't fault anybody for being fully home automated and tech savvy, but I guess maybe I see it so much at work when I come home, I'd rather just watch a TV show.
It's like we were talking about on the couch, like it's a line between security and freedom, right? Mm-hmm. People are very willing to give up for the convenience. Yeah. But I think something you said, lean into it is powerful. I think that's the one thing people should take from this. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine that I've known forever. She was saying just how she doesn't know anything about AI. She's never used it. And I was telling her, I'm like, you're going to literally turn into like our parents, where my dad, how do you use this phone? What do you do? And like, you're going to turn into that with AI. You have to stay on top of it, or you're going to be one of those parents that doesn't know how to like open a browser. So you have to lean into it for sure.
You absolutely do. And that's it. It may not be something you use every day. Like, I would much rather build a Lego set or go for a walk by the lake than sit at home and play with tech.
Yeah.
That's just, I don't want tech, but I embrace it.
Right.
And I use it.
Yeah.
I just don't want it in my...
Assuming.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the same page with that.
That's my choice.
Thanks.
If I could paint, I would paint.
Yeah. Well, I could paint.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I could...
You have a better chance of being a painter than I do doing what you do.
I doubt that. I doubt that.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
It was awesome. And is there anything that you're either plugging or anything that you can promote or anything along those lines with your company or anything else?
No, I'm just here
purely altruistic.
I love your podcast. I love the fact that you like to represent different ideas, whether you agree with them or not, and just have those conversations. And so I just thought it would be cool to do this. And
it's awesome. Not everyone shares your opinion, so I appreciate that.
I'm just here along for the ride.
Cool,
my
man.
Time.
Awesome, brother. I really hope that you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please take a moment, leave me a review on Spotify and Apple especially. It takes about only 30 to 40 seconds to leave a nice review. You can just click on the stars, you can say something nice. I really do read them all, and it really does mean a lot to me if you could just please do that. And also make sure you hit subscribe and share the episode, connect with me online, connect with our guests. We love all the interaction, so please do so. Also, please check out my website, jayalders.com. I am an artist, I'm a father, I'm a family man. I appreciate your support. I would love to get your eyeballs on my artwork. So, yes, keep sending messages. Let me know who you'd like to see on the show next. And I wish you an awesome rest of your day.